What if I told you that Oscar Piastri's most important time in the second week of Bahrain was not the 1 minute and 32.861 seconds that appeared on the table, but the pace that he hit during the long runs with the MCL40 and that almost no one analyzed in depth? Because while many were looking at who topped the clock at the end of the day, McLaren was building something much more dangerous. A solid, consistent and quietly competitive foundation that could change the real balance when the season starts. The second week of testing in Bahrain was the moment when the noise began to cloud the real analysis. Many headlines focused on who was leading the table at the end of the day, on the thousands that separated them, on whether the new technical cycle was going to change the established order. But if we look precisely at what happened specifically with Oscar Piastri and the MCL40 during that second week, the story goes much deeper than just a quick check-in. The first day of the second test already left a clear signal. Piastri clocked a 1 minute and 33.469 seconds and was just 0.010 off the best time of the day. That figure, in isolation, may seem like just a good attempt at mock ranking. However, the context is what transforms that data into something relevant. McLaren was not in exhibition mode. The program included different setup configurations, aerodynamic work, compound tests and engine mode adjustments. That is to say, the car was not optimized solely to squeeze out a lap. Even so, the Australian remained in the upper zone without needing to look for a desperate turn. Here appears the first key element of hidden rhythm: base stability. When a car allows you to alternate technical programs and still remain competitive in absolute times, it means that its operating window is wide. And in Formula One, a wide window equals confidence. Piastri didn't seem to be fighting with the car, seemed to be building understanding. The second day was even more revealing. The 1 minute and 32.861 seconds that left him just 0.058 off the best overall time of the test did not come in isolated conditions. It came after 86 laps with a full race simulation and multiple pit stops. That completely changes the narrative. Setting a time after a few laps with low fuel and fresh tires is not the same as doing it after having worked on long runs, thermal management and consistency in an extended stint. That detail turns the fast lap into the consequence of a solid foundation, not an isolated blow. Furthermore, the comparative telemetry analysis showed that Piastri gained time especially in the first sector using a more aggressive electrical deployment on the straight and a more refined rev range. This does not speak of a simple, aggressive configuration, but rather a clear understanding of the new hybrid system and how to strategically squeeze it. The hidden rhythm was not only in the aerodynamics, but in the integration between pilot and power unit. But the data that has the most weight in this initial act is the mileage. More than 220 laps accumulated in the preseason place him among the drivers with the greatest total running time. In an environment where reliability can mark the start of the season, this volume of work is a silent statement. McLaren wasn't just fast, it was consistent. And Piastri wasn't just fast, it was methodical. What is truly interesting is how that consistency was built. The long runs did not show abrupt drops in performance or uncontrolled peaks. Progression, adaptation, and an ability to maintain competitive times lap after lap were observed. This is what differentiates a promising car from a structurally competitive one. The MCL40 didn't seem jittery or unpredictable. It seemed to evolve with each adjustment. At this point in the analysis, the conclusion of Act 1 is clear. Piastri's hidden pace in the second week of Bahrain was not an isolated flash on the timetable, but the sum of stability, workload, and energy optimization. While others were looking for immediate headlines, McLaren seemed to be building something more dangerous. A solid technical foundation that can sustain real performance when the season begins. Because there is a detail that completely changes the reading of the tests. McLaren did not deliberately pursue the absolute best time in qualifying simulation. While other teams were trying to make a clear mark on the table, the Woking team spent much of their time experimenting with specifications, setups, and long runs. That decision is not accidental. It is a declaration of internal trust. In the second week of Bahrain, the most valuable comparison was not in the single lap, but in the race simulations. In one of the most relevant analyses of the tests, it is exposed how McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes carried out relatively comparable long simulations. And although there are variables such as different compounds and fuel loads that can distort the result, what is observed is a trend. The MCL40 does not fall apart as the laps pass. It maintains a stable rhythm without abrupt degradation peaks. This is where Piastri's hidden rhythm takes on a strategic dimension. In long runs, the important thing is not to be the fastest on a specific lap, but to minimize the drop in performance. If a car can sustain a reduced delta between consecutive laps, that opens up an enormous tactical range. More powerful undercuts, greater flexibility in stopping windows, and above all, the ability to apply pressure without destroying tires. And what was seen in that second week is that Piastri could alternate rhythms without the car seeming unstable. There was no sign of an extremely narrow window. There were no constant balance corrections that betrayed a nervous car. That's crucial, because when a driver can modulate his aggressiveness without the car reacting unpredictably, the limit becomes progressive, not abrupt. And that is gold in racing. Another key point is energy management. In Act 1 we talked about the most aggressive deployment in the first sector in its fast lap. In this act we must understand the other side, long stint efficiency. If a driver can use maximum deployment when needed and then recover without excessively penalizing his average pace, it means that the hybrid system is well integrated into the car's philosophy. This is not achieved by improvising, it is built in the tests. Furthermore, the volume of accumulated laps reinforces the message. When a car completes high mileage without relevant interruptions, the team can work on fine micro-adjustments: height, dynamic rake, behavior in transition from braking to traction. These are details that do not appear in the headlines, but that build real tenths on Sunday. And here the uncomfortable question arises for rivals. Was McLaren hiding something? Not in the classic sense of extremely high or low fuel, but in the sense of not showing its true potential in pure qualifying. The fact that they didn't go for a final exhibition lap suggests the focus was on understanding the car, not sending a message. And when a team prioritizes understanding over marketing in the preseason, it's usually because it knows it has a competitive foundation. Because if in Bahrain, under controlled test conditions, the car already showed stability, energy efficiency, and consistency in the long run, the real question is not whether McLaren will be competitive. The real question is how much room for growth they had under the surface. Because the tests do not distribute points, but they do reveal trends. And what the second week in Bahrain left is a clear sign. The MCL40 is not an explosive and fragile car. It is a structurally competitive car. Piastri did not need a miraculous lap to take the lead. His 1 minute and 32.861 seconds was the consequence of a day of 86 laps, with race simulation included. That means that performance comes from accumulated work, not from an isolated attempt. When a car shows long-run stability, energy efficiency, and high mileage without major failures, the margin of evolution during the first races is usually cleaner. Teams that start with an unstable foundation spend the first few days correcting problems. McLaren, on the other hand, seems to be starting from understanding. And that completely changes the competitive landscape. Furthermore, there is a psychological element that cannot be ignored. McLaren did not seek the absolute leader in the fastest lap during the tests. It prioritized experiments and long runs. That's not the behavior of an insecure team. It is that of a team that trusts in its package and wants to maximize it in a real race. When a team doesn't feel the need to show its potential in February, it's usually because it knows it can do so in March. For Piastri, this is even more relevant. In 2024, he already showed that he can compete at the highest level, but now the narrative changes. He is no longer the young man who surprises. It is the pilot that sustains development. In Bahrain, his pace was not spectacular in the media sense, it was solid in the structural sense. And in a long championship, solidity wins more points than flashes. Projecting towards the start of the season, the scenario is clear. If the MCL40 keeps the degradation controlled, allows efficient electrical deployment, and preserves that wide operating window seen in the second week, McLaren will not depend exclusively on qualifying in the front row to be competitive. You will have strategic tools. And when you have strategic tools, you can win races even without being the fastest car on a lap. Piastri's hidden rhythm, then, is not just a test reading. It is a silent warning. Because when the first race comes around and the rest of the teams start to show their real cards, they may discover that McLaren wasn't hiding speed, it was building consistency. 1 minute and 32.861 seconds was not an empty number, it was the consequence of 86 laps of progressive understanding. Total mileage over 220 laps was not a decorative statistic, it was proof of reliability and consistency. And the fact that McLaren did not obsessively pursue the absolute best time, prioritizing experiments and long runs, reinforces the idea that the true objective was not to impress, but to understand. Piastri's hidden rhythm is not in a specific tenth. It's in the repetition, in stability between turns, in the ability to use aggressive deployment when necessary and then sustain the pace without an abrupt drop. You're in a car that doesn't seem nervous or unpredictable but progressive. And that, in a long season, weighs more than any preseason starter. The conclusion is clear. McLaren did not leave Bahrain as the undisputed dominant car, but as a structurally mature package. And Piastri did not come out as a brilliant promise, but as a driver who already understands how to extract performance from a complex technical base. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.